Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to get started. Welcome to this meeting of the Built Heritage Subcommittee. We're going to start with the agenda here in front of us. I have received no regrets this morning, so everybody is in attendance. Declarations of interest. Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'd like to declare interest on two items. One is on 285 Acacia, where I provided heritage consulting services to the applicant, and the other is 180 Metcalf. I'm a tenant in the office building of the developer, and a friend, and also given him heritage advice from time to time. So I'm declaring interest in that item.
Thank you very much. Okay, confirmation of minutes. Any questions, comments on the minutes from the 14th of May? Carried? Carried. Okay, so the consent agenda is as follows. Under item 1, we have a presentation, which we'll hear in a few moments. On item 2, which is a designation of 180 Metcalf Street, we have a staff presentation and also delegation signed up to speak. On item 3, which is a delegated authority for applications under the Ontario Heritage Act, we also have a delegation to sign up to speak, so we'll hold that item. On item 4, which is the application for demolition and new construction on 220 Sandridge, we don't have any speakers signed up, so I'm looking to members to see if there are any questions, comments, or can that item be carried? Carried? Yeah. Yeah, and just so that the public understands, this is an item which had previously received demolition approval from the Built Heritage Subcommittee. The demolition permit had expired, and this is a reapplication with slightly different, and I think in staff's view, improved plans. So this is not a new item to the BHSC, but is coming back a second time. Okay, so that item is carried. And then item 5, which is an application for demolition and new construction, we have a speaker signed up to speak on that item too, so we're going to hold that. So with that, we're going to start with item number 1, which is a presentation on the Prime Minister's Row proposal. And while I invite our guests up to the front, I'll simply say that the context for this presentation, which is an information item only, is you'll recall, members, that at our retreat in the fall, we talked about the fact that we wanted to ensure that this committee was considering heritage in a broader context and was open to learning more and educating both ourselves and the public about broader initiatives in the community. And this particular item falls squarely within that context. So I'd like to introduce Sunita Millington and Leanna Musa, who I believe are both members of Action Sandy Hill and have a very interesting proposal to speak about this morning. So welcome to both of you, and over to you for your presentation, and then we'll give members here an opportunity for questions or comments. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Councillor Nussbaum. As you mentioned, my name is Sunita Millington, and sitting next to me is Leanne Musa. We're thrilled to be with you today as the Executive Directors of Prime Minister's Row Incorporated. Prime Minister's Row is a newly established not-for-profit corporation mandated to preserve, protect, and celebrate Laurier Avenue East and its environs in light of the national historic importance of the area. It stems from the work and dedication of countless local volunteers, long engaged in the preservation of our collective heritage, and has since grown to garner broad support, including at the provincial and federal levels of government. We are here today in the hopes that you, members of the Built Heritage Subcommittee, are equally captivated by the potential of Prime Minister's Row, and will add your name to the list of those working to see the project to fruition. Until recently, the history of Laurier Avenue East and its surrounding streets has seemingly been all but erased from our collective memory. A tragedy, given that this area has arguably housed more influential Canadians than any other community in the country. In addition to a storied and diverse group of luminaries that includes figures such as Father of Medicare Tommy Douglas, CPR magnate Sir Sanford Fleming, Confederation poet Archibald Lampman, Canada's first female senator Kathleen Wilson, World War I flying ace Billy Bishop, and Yusuf Karsh, namesake of the city's own Karsh Masson Gallery. It has also served as residence to lumber barons, governor generals, chief justices of the Supreme Court, cabinet ministers, mayors, lieutenant governors, clerks of the Privy Council, and heads of national institutions. Perhaps even more incredible, 7 fathers of Confederation and 8 prime ministers have lived on or within a few blocks of Laurier Avenue East, and a number of those homes remain standing still, including Macdonald's Stadacona Hall, Diefenbaker's abode at the Strathcona, Laurier's Laurier House, where Mackenzie King also resided, Tupper's Daly Street residence, Pearson's Augusta Street cottage, and Trudeau's suite on King Edward Avenue's Martin Terrace. Today, when Canadians wander up Laurier en route to City Hall, meander past St. Albans the Martyr Church, home to parishioners Sir John A. and Sir Charles Tupper, or amble from All Saints Church, which hosted Sir Robert Borden's state funeral and held Canada's only royal wedding, to sit for a while in Strathcona Park, they are quite literally walking in the footsteps of our nation builders. Truly no other avenue in Canada can boast this bounty of historical riches. In looking at these buildings, however, you may remark that most of them are already protected. So you may wonder why we're here before you when your work is ostensibly done. The answer is quite simple. Like you, we know that heritage is about so much more than protecting buildings. The Prime Minister's Row Initiative is a large-scale project that seeks to bring Laurier Avenue East from Strathcona Park to King Edward Avenue to life, and by extension, to inspire Canadians to connect with their history. By creating Canada's first street museum in the heart of the nation's capital, Prime Minister's Row will offer a permanent, innovative, interactive, participation-oriented, multi-block outdoor cultural space dedicated to honoring the legacies of all past Prime Ministers and celebrating other significant nation builders. This initiative will leverage the extraordinary built heritage assets located along this route and will be complemented through streetscape improvements, the installation of commemorative components, the development of educational and cultural programming elements, and the organization of an ongoing, evolving event series, all of which will engage the efforts, energy, and expertise of Canadians from coast to coast to coast in the lead-up to Canada's 2017 sesquicentennial celebrations and beyond. In this way, Prime Minister's Row will bring Canadians together to discuss contemporary national issues and will provide the physical space for individual and collective reflection on questions of identity, culture, values, and history. In essence, Prime Minister's Row will offer the literal and figurative meeting point between those who shaped Canada's first 150 years and those who will shape Canada's next 150 years. What does this mean for the city? Prime Minister's Row will serve as a major tourist draw and will generate interest and focus on the City of Ottawa, both as the nation's capital, as well as a dynamic, exciting urban space in its own right. Greater profile for Laurier Avenue East, through the celebration of its unique history and built heritage, will respond to many of the city's own strategic priorities. It will generate economic benefits and indeed promote small business growth within Ottawa. It will encourage the positive, healthy, and appropriate transformation of an important urban streetscape that is currently underappreciated. It will encourage increased pedestrian and cycling traffic, and in this latter regard will support the principles of sustainability, walkability, bikeability, and complete communities by ensuring locals are well served by local businesses, and conversely, that local businesses can be easily accessed by residents and visitors alike. In sum, We believe that the investment required to launch Prime Minister's Row will pay enormous dividends, not only in terms of profile and revenue generation for the city, but also in helping build a healthier, happier, more sustainable community at the heart of the nation's capital. So what are our next steps, and how can you help make this vision a reality? Before I turn to our specific asks, I think that it is important to underscore that virtually all aspects of Prime Minister's Row fall under the jurisdiction of the city. However, key actors within other levels of government also have relevant mandates. Furthermore, we have begun and will continue to reach out to private sector partners to leverage all funding sources. Our initial discussions are positive. With that in mind, we would ask the subcommittee to consider supporting the Prime Minister's Row initiative in the following ways. Firstly, by reaching out to the National Capital Commission and the Department of Canadian Heritage to explore opportunities to move forward those elements of Prime Minister's Row that fall under federal jurisdiction, including, but not limited to, wayfinding and signage, illumination, and the transformation of Laurier Avenue East into an extension of Confederation Boulevard. Secondly, by offering a letter of support for the Prime Minister's Row initiative to the Ottawa 2017 Task Force in order to fund, in whole or in part, the multimedia platforms, the programming elements, and the initial Prime Minister's Row event series. Thirdly, by supporting requests for in-kind contributions of expertise from city staff in support of various elements of the initiative. By measuring the impact of the Prime Minister's Row project, and by extension, gathering data to bolster the arguments in support of the economic benefit of heritage preservation to the City of Ottawa. And finally, by initiating the symbolic designation of Prime Minister's Row and its surrounding neighbourhood as Canada's Prime Ministerial Precinct. The Prime Minister's Row initiative is the tangible manifestation of our belief that we must stop thinking of built heritage as simply a collection of old structures in need of protection, and instead see it as shared cultural landscapes and spaces that contain our secrets, our successes, our lives lived, our losses, and even our loves. And in this regard, we must not fool ourselves into believing that we've preserved our heritage just by throwing a plaque on a building. Instead, we must continue to seek compelling, enduring, innovative, and interactive ways to engage with the people, places, and events that came before us. It is only then that we will truly facilitate reflection, foster connections, celebrate identity, and actually imbue these places and spaces with meaning. Accordingly, we are here to offer you, as members of the Built Heritage Subcommittee, the opportunity to be part of a transformation, not only of Laurier Avenue East, but indeed of societal attitudes towards heritage preservation and the benefits it can bring. We believe that Prime Minister's Row presents a compelling and concrete initiative through which to launch this process and demonstrate this value. We hope you agree. Thank you very much for your time. We would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That was impressive. And congratulations on all the effort and work that went into this effort until now. Just so that before we move to questions, I certainly appreciate the fact that you've been very clear and succinct about how the city might help. We're not going to consider that at this meeting in terms of any action, because this is just an information item, but certainly the committee, if it chose to in a subsequent meeting, could consider through a motion ways in which it may want to respond. But that won't be the subject of the discussion, but I do want to make sure that members have an opportunity to ask you questions, and maybe I'll start out by asking how things are going in terms of the conversations you've had with other levels of government. You mentioned that, so I'm just just curious if you can give us some sense of whether there was interest when you spoke to members of the federal government or the NCC, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been actually very encouraged by the level of engagement and take-up of this initiative. In particular, we were invited to submit a proposal, which of course is open to any other group, but to the Canada 150 funding envelope, which we have done. We're looking forward to hearing news on that front, obviously. We do know that certainly within our area we have had the support not only of our own councillor at the municipal level, but at the provincial level and the federal level. Both our MPP and our MP have come out publicly in favor and support of the initiative. And we've also had very encouraging discussions with the National Capital Commission. We know that an outreach on the part of the city to discuss would be positively met.
Great, thank you. I know Councillor Wilkinson had a question.
Yeah, just first, I'm really quite impressed by what you've done. First of all, I think this is a very good initiative that I think we would like to, I certainly would like to talk further about with the committee, because I think there are some things here that would be very beneficial to us. Have you talked with the economic development people in the city on this yet? Because I think there is very definitely an economic development aspect to it.
We haven't, but we did in fact do some outreach recently. I did invite Mr. Bashir to attend today. I don't know if he is here, but if he isn't, we had undertaken to follow up with a copy of our presentation and an offer to meet in person to discuss, because that's certainly a relationship that we obviously think is important.
I think that's very important as we start to look at the city. That's one of the important factors to obviously to look at. The other is Parks Canada, because you're going to start at the canal, which is managed by them, and they have a house there that's managed by them. So I think that there needs to almost be, I guess you've got a committee going on it, but it needs to bring some of those people into it, because I think this municipal infrastructure is a big part of it. The psychological part is federal. And I think it's really important that the federal government be there. Otherwise, I don't really think it's going to work in the long run, because you can do short-run things, but the long run is going to require a partnership with the city and it could be through the NCC, but it really is more a national item, which is not NCC, but actually the Government of Canada. I think your Heritage Canada caucus is very important in that regard.
As you rightly point out, Canadian Heritage has picked up a great deal of the responsibility that previously fell to the NCC, and I think as they're all feeling out their mandate shifts moving forward, what we really need is to strike a bit of a task force that will allow which will allow Parks Canada, the NCC, Canadian Heritage, and the City of Ottawa to explore those elements that are within their jurisdictions and figure out how to work together.
And if it does come together, I think it's really critical that maybe it's a committee, I'm not sure what you'd call it, a foundation or something, that would be the ongoing responsibility, because you don't want to have something happen in 2017 and it all fall apart.
Yes.
So there has to be, there's a lot of work involved here. You've obviously done a huge amount of work already, and I'm very impressed by what you've done. I've always say that the best ideas come from the community. That happens in my area, and I see it happening here as well. So I would certainly suggest to the chair here that we take this, and we'll need to do some discussions among ourselves, but also with our colleagues and with city staff to see how the best way of dealing with this in the city. But you've asked the federal government already for money under the federal program. So we're also going to be asking, according to this, to the city under the city program, I guess for different things.
Yes, that's correct. So I guess there's sort of two questions that I'll answer quickly. I'll add in terms of those who will be receptive to outreach on the part of the city. We certainly understand that Parks Canada is very supportive in principle, and obviously as the managers of Laurier House, they see this as something that would obviously benefit Laurier House in particular. And yeah, so we have asked for funding, obviously, through the federal envelope, and I guess perhaps this stands as our ask through the Ottawa 2017 Task Force for funding at the municipal level.
Well, I believe your councillor is on that committee, so you do have an open door into that there. But I really think there's something we should pursue, and we obviously have to do it fairly quickly, because 2017 is going to be here sooner than we expect.
Yeah, and
if we could perhaps have leave it on your hands to bring together some people to discuss this and then come back to us to have a more fulsome discussion and then send it on through us, through planning to council. There's a process we need to follow.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great suggestion. I know the Vice Chair had a question as well.
Not a question, sorry, but just a comment. You asked us if you could captivate us with the idea of Prime Minister's Row, and I have to confess I'm immediately captivated. As someone who walks Prime Minister's Row almost every day, because I live adjacent to Strathcona Park and walk to my office in the Byward Market, one of the things that I always think when I walk along Laurier is the footsteps of the Prime Ministers. Not all of them. I usually think of Mackenzie King, because Mackenzie King walked from Laurier House to Parliament and back again sometimes at night. And I've always speculated about imagine myself walking with him from Parliament late at night after session back to his home with a little excursion through the Byward Market, because according to his diaries, he sometimes did that in order to meet the people on his way home. And so congratulations on your effort, and I, for one, am supportive of it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I think with that, we'd like to thank both of you for coming and for the presentation and for all of your hard work, and I look forward to following up with you following the meeting.
Thank you. Great.
Okay, so I guess we have to formally receive that presentation. Received? Okay, great, thanks. So moving on to item 2, which is designation of the Medical Arts Building, 180 Metcalf Street, under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We're going to start with a presentation from staff. And I know Ms. Collins is preparing herself for her presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. As you can see, this is a report on the designation of the Medical Arts Building at 180 Metcalf Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The property is located at the corner of Metcalf and Nepean Streets, just a couple of blocks from here. If you walk out the door of City Hall, you can see it as you go down Nepean Street. It's an aerial photo just showing the site. So the building is a 6-story building with a small 7-story penthouse located at the corner. It does have a large parking lot, which, just out of interest, was Ottawa's first commercial purpose-built parking lot, and had a very interesting it's gone now, but it had a very interesting railing with a sign that said parking yard, and it was included on the original plans. So I know we're trying to get rid of parking in the downtown, but in the 1920s it was all the fashion. So this is just a bird's eye view, so you can see, so it's across from the new building at the corner of Nepean and Metcalf. This is the building in question, so this is the front facade. You can see the rear here, so it's adjacent to a sort of 1960s apartment building, and it's a bit difficult to see this one, but that's the rear with the parking lot. Just some photos. This is a historic photo of the building. We don't know the date, but I would imagine it's fairly early in its history based on the cars in the photo. So it's a 6-story building designed by Werner Nofke in 1927 in the Art Deco style. And when you've been on this committee for a while, you will learn that Nofke is everywhere in this city and is one of Ottawa's most prolific architects. This is a current picture, so as you can see based on this and the historic photo, the building has been incredibly well preserved over its almost 100-year history. Most of its original details remain intact. It is a landmark building at the corner of Nepean and Metcalf.
This is looking at it, looking west along Nepean towards the building. This view is actually obscured now. This was taken from before the new high-rise was constructed. Just some of the architectural details. Beautiful limestone door surround with this bronze frieze above the door with Medical Arts Building written on it. Some of the decorative piers and stone downspouts at the top of the building. Just some more. So this is some wrought iron grillwork over one of the windows. These panels are in between the windows on both the front and the north facade. This is above the front door. It's a large sort of two-story arched window. So now that you're familiar with the building, I'll go briefly through the policy framework for designations. So the Provincial Policy Statement 2.6.1 states that significant built heritage resources shall be conserved. The City of Ottawa's official plan states that individual buildings that are of cultural heritage value will be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And then the Ontario Heritage Act, Section 29 of the Act, gives municipalities the ability to designate properties that are deemed to be of cultural heritage value under Part 4 of the Act. And in order to be designated, they must meet at least one of the criteria in Ontario Regulation 0906. So I'm just going to briefly go through the criteria for this building. Firstly, there are 3 criteria: design, physical value, associative, historical value, and contextual value. So for this building, as I mentioned, it's a good example of the Art Deco style popular in Canada in the 1920s and 30s. Some of the typical features that I showed you in the photos are its flat roof, those copper panels, and some of the geometric patterned brick panels. The building has recessed mortar joints that accentuate the sharp edges of the brick, and there's even though it's a 6-story building, there's a very strong sense of verticality through the brick piers that break the cornice line. Historic associative value, it is associated with the spread of commercial office buildings south from the central business district that was associated with Parliament Hill in the late 19th and early 20th century. This area was primarily residential until these buildings started to be constructed in the 1920s and 30s. As I mentioned, it was designed by Ottawa architect Werner Nofke, who was one of Ottawa's most prolific architects, practiced in the city for over 50 years. And it is associated with the trend of purpose-built medical office buildings in the 1920s and 30s throughout North America. There's similar buildings were built in Winnipeg, Toronto, Montreal, Hamilton, all over the country, and they were intended to be purpose medical office only. And then contextual value, it is a neighborhood landmark for its prominent location on a corner in the downtown core. So in conclusion, the department determined that this building meets all 3 of the criteria of Ontario Regulation 0906, and as a result recommends the issuance of a notice of intention to designate under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act according to the statement, that's a typo, Statement of Cultural Heritage Value attached as Document 6. And if there's any questions, I can answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. A question from Councillor Wilkinson.
Very large 27-story building it was, on this, incorporating this building. Now, I've seen cases where they have done buildings incorporating heritage buildings in other cities. Is that still going to be permitted, or is this going to lead to a little bit of disagreement between owners and the city?
That's a good question. Through you, Mr. Chair, the application for zoning bylaw amendment will be heard by Planning Committee at its next meeting, and this designation application will also be at that Planning Committee meeting, so we intentionally scheduled them to be there together so that they could be discussed as a whole. This designation would not prevent somebody from constructing an addition to this building, whether it's the current proposal or some future proposal. However, at the time of a site plan application or a building permit application, the property owner would have to come back to this committee with an application to alter the existing building. So there would have to be, all the formal designs and all that sort of thing. As part of the zoning bylaw amendment, the applicant did submit a cultural heritage impact statement, which was not required because the building isn't designated, but we suggested that it would be a good idea, and that document has been listed on today's agenda for information of the committee.
Does the owner agree with the designation coming forward or not?
I believe the owner does not object, but I think they are here, and I wouldn't want to speak for them.
So I've seen some very nice buildings done incorporating the two, so I think it's possible for them to do that, but I just, thank you, that just clarifies that.
Member Quinn?
Thank you for your presentation, Leslie. I just want to be clear that, you know, what we're considering the designation of the building. It is not any potential future development. Yes.
That is correct.
And the designation is about the exterior of the building in its entirety. It does not include any interior elements.
That is correct. So we've included the entire exterior and excluded the interior. We did have a look at the interior, but there's very, very little left. I thought there might be some very beautiful Art Deco lobby, but there isn't. It's been all renovated. So there's not really anything in the interior to preserve.
Okay. I do have a memory. My dentist was in there when I was a little girl, Dr. French, and it did have a rather cool interior, I can remember, but I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to hear that it has been altered since then. But this is great. I'm really pleased to see this building come before us today. But another question that I have, if had you come across at all in your research, looking at historic photographs or plans, what the original front door may have looked like? I do notice it's been altered.
Yes, it is. It has been modernized. I don't think it's visible in that photo.
No, it isn't.
The historic photo, it's not? No. However, the plans are in Nofke's job, referenced through Nofke's job book at the Library and Archives, so we could find out what it was, most likely. I think there's probably elevations on file. I've been working on this for a while, so I did the research probably 3 years ago.
Okay.
So I can't quite remember.
You know, the front door could have had some interesting Art Deco elements. It would be interesting, and the architects involved might be interested to see
To restore it, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, we do have a public delegation signed up. I believe the owner of the building, Mr. Toth, is here and has signed up to speak on this. So, Mr. Toth, if you would like to come to the microphone and speak, and with any of your colleagues, maybe Sally will let our guests sit in those 3 chairs. Good morning and welcome to the subcommittee. Just put your microphone on, please.
I'm a lawyer acting for Mr. Toth. My name is Alan Cohen. John Toth is to my left. Rob Bahi, the architect on the file, is to my right. John has a statement he wants to make, and then I was going to respond to the statements about the potential for development.
First.
Is it on? Thank you. Good morning. Would like to introduce myself. Before we get into it, I have to tell you that I'm not only half blind, but I'm also deaf, and I have difficulty hearing a lot of the acoustics here. I'm the owner of the building. My name is John Toth. As a little background on myself and on our company, our focus has always been on purchasing and developing quality assets with long-term hold strategy. As an example, I'm sure you're all familiar with Mercury Court on the corner of Dalhousie and Rideau Street. We bought that some 35 years ago, and instead of choosing to demolish it, which we had the choice at that point, we decided to restore it and maintain it and to refurbish the whole building. As a matter of fact, I think just last weekend it was on the Doors Open Ottawa list, and apparently a very successful showing. To come back to the Medical Arts Building, we acquired the building over 30 years ago, well before the building was placed on the city's heritage list. I guess at that point, if we had gone ahead with something, we would have been able to do whatever we wanted to. But I bought it because we love old buildings, and we own a number of them in the city here. And I've always had a dream of conserving and integrating it into a mixed-use development that reflects the city's planning strategies for downtown. Our team has cooperated with city staff. Staff has certainly cooperated with us in working together to move our plan forward. In light of staff's approach and recommendation that we believe staff will make for the rezoning of the Planning Committee, we're not objecting to the intention to designate. I'd like to thank city staff and in particular Leslie Collins for working with us in such a positive way to move this project forward. That's all I have to say, and if the committee has any questions, Mr. Cohen and Mr. Lahi are here to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Toth. Mr. Cohen?
Yes, I thought it would be worthwhile if I spent 2 or 3 minutes telling this committee about a success story. At least it's a success up to June 11th, 2015. There are other steps to take. Heritage planners contacted my client, who contacted me, and advised that the city had had this building on the heritage list for a couple of decades and was going to come forward with a request to have you, committee and council, designate the building under Part 4. We met with your staff, both heritage staff and planning staff, and asked them if they would work with us as they asked us if we would work with them. And what we did is retained the architect, we retained a heritage consultant, we retained a planner with a view to dovetailing this matter that's before you today with the planning application that's going to committee at the end of the month. The immediate and observable tension was, on the one end, heritage staff wanted to designate this building. On the other end, you as a council, that is you councilors as a council, had determined that parts of Centertown ought to be intensified. This site is one that calls for 27 stories. A certain design of building is hoped for. Numbers of units would be built that would take the pressure off expanding the city. That was the tension we decided to cope with and to resolve, and to this point we have, and that's the reason that my client is not objecting. So the plan is to go to Planning Committee and Council to seek the 27-story zoning that will implement the official plan, to come back some other day with a proposal to integrate the new building with the existing building as may be modified through your approval, and thereby manage to fulfill both municipal ambitions. So I want to thank Leslie and Don Herwire's staff that allowed us to take the time. It's taken well over a year to get here, but I believe it's been a model of behavior, and I'm hoping that the next steps, as I said, will be equally successful.
Thank you very much for that presentation as well. Questions? Yes, Member Small.
Not so much a question. I'd just like to congratulate you. I think this is just a really, really wonderful example of stewardship of a property. And your actions, I believe, as a lifetime resident here, make the city a richer place. So thank you so much for what you're doing and the process and time, and obviously great cost you've gone to on this project. Thank you.
Councillor McKinney.
Thank you, Chair. I also want to echo that. I think that having this building designated and held for future generations is a tremendous asset to Centertown. And as we can see when we look at it closely, it is a magnificent building. So I do thank you for that. I think that what's happening here today is very positive. I just had one quick question, and I'm not sure. Maybe it's directed more towards staff. So, and it's just me not understanding how the whole process works. So if you come back, when you go to planning and you have a plan for an addition onto the, so you're going up and back as well. How does that impact the heritage designation if you at all change, even say, the back wall to the building?
I'd rather hear staff answer.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Correct.
Through you, Mr. Chair, a typical lawyer, but basically the statement of cultural heritage value that's attached as document 6 to the report does identify the entire building, but it also identifies what the heritage attributes of the building are. And most, in this instance, it's an interesting building because pretty much all of the detail is on the front and the north side because it's a corner building. So there's very little detail on the back. It's a yellow brick building with a back wall. Our primary concern in working with the applicant in looking at their proposed design was that the volume of the building remain readable. We didn't want to see a proposal that would just see a facade with a 27-story tower sticking right up the back of it. So so basically, when the time comes and an application comes forward, we would analyze whatever that application is, whether it's the current design or some modified version of that design, and determine whether or not it meets the attributes that have been outlined in the statement of cultural heritage value, and then make a recommendation based on that. And so that's why we laid it out in the way we did, captures the values that we think are important.
So just to clarify then, does that happen at zoning or at site plan?
There's no real requirement. Somebody can apply at any time. We generally suggest that people do it concurrent with their site plan because at that point they have more detailed designs and that sort of thing, because as you know, this committee we tend to recommend that the applicant is tied to their plans. So if they were tied to the plans that they have now for the zoning, it would be more challenging. The other thing is that as the building isn't designated at this point in time, we can't make them do an application to alter because that's a process under the Heritage Act once it's designated.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions, I want to thank our visitors for coming, and congratulations on what looks like a very interesting project. Thank you. Okay, so on the item, Carrot? Yeah, great, thank you. So we're moving now to item 3, which is delegated authority for applications under the Ontario Heritage Act. And if members have had a chance to see the report, this report is recommending essentially formalizing to some extent existing practice that additional minor heritage building alteration approvals be delegated to the General Manager of Planning and Growth Management. So I want to see whether members have any questions. I know staff would be prepared to answer them. Again, I think we should see this as formalization. So we've got a question from Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, just one quick one.
Yeah.
Just a really quick question, just as an example. The report says there's 42 files that came forward to build heritage planning and agriculture. If this went through, 34 of those were to still come through. Can you just give me an example of what some of the other 8 were?
There's one I can think of in Rockcliffe Park last year where somebody was building a small addition at the side of their house, and generally when something is visible from the street in Rockcliffe, we bring it forward. So I think that one would have, nobody had any concerns with it. It was basically, for lack of a better word, a paper-pushing exercise. Everybody was happy, the community was happy, so that we probably would have just approved at the staff level, which would have cut down the time for the property owner as well to be able to construct their addition.
But like designations would still come?
Yes. This is only for applications to alter. So demolitions would still come, any refusals would still come, and designations would still come.
All right, thanks.
Question from Councillor Wilkinson.
I have no problem with that, except are you going to notify the ward council? We don't usually get notified in alterations, and yet in the case of a heritage building, I think that's important.
Yes, one of the things that we've incorporated into the recommended delegated authority is that the ward council will be notified of every application. Right now, the ward council is only notified when it's something that's coming forward to this committee. And then the ward council will have the ability to withdraw the delegated authority if they wish, and then it would come forward to this committee and council.
Okay, so you're going to do it like site plans?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I think that's important. So essentially what staff is saying is if either the ward councillor takes the delegated authority away or staff is recommending refusal of the application, in either case it would come to the to council, which I think is sufficient protection in terms of a contentious application. Member Quinn.
Thank you. I just did a little checklist when I went over the everything looked to be in order, and one question came to mind, which was in terms of the size of potential alterations. And it says here the size, if the size of a proposed alteration is less than 30% of the gross floor area of the existing building, and the proposal meets the Conservation District guidelines or district plan. Can you just tell me how the 30% was arrived at?
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. We originally didn't have a percentage in there, and then we thought that it needed to be more specific and clearer. So we chose 30% because that's the number that used to be included in the heritage overlay. So under the zoning bylaw, if you were building an addition that was 30% of the gross floor area or less, you did not need a minor variance under the zoning bylaw because it was deemed to be a minor addition. So that's where it came from.
Okay.
If the committee has strong feelings one way or the other on that, we're flexible, I think.
Mr. Chair, just for further clarification, that 30% was in place for, well over 15 years, and it proved to be, after, looking at the kind of applications that were over 30% under the heritage overlay, it seemed to be consistent with the goals we were trying to accomplish through delegated authority, that it was a reasonable percentage and had worked quite well with the heritage overlay.
Thank you. I guess a concern that comes to mind for me when I saw this was that if you think of a house, a 3,000 square foot house, then, we're talking about a 1,000-foot alteration or addition, potentially, which isn't insignificant. And we do have, in the time that I've been on this committee, several properties around that size within the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District that have come before us. I would say almost every single meeting, the property from Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District is before us. And so I think that is a significant reality that we are likely to see, or you are likely to see, if this were to go through, that size of potential addition. And I guess I do have concerns about the implications of that in certain situations. I don't know how other members of the...
Well, here's a question. If let's take a hypothetical situation where there was an application that fell within the 30% guideline, but for whatever reason it was a contentious application and it had significant community interest. I guess the question that I have is, would passing this delegated authority still give staff the option of bringing an application to the committee in a case where you felt there was sufficient political or community interest?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I think so. I think there's the ability where there's one where we feel like the committee could have good input, or like you said, there's significant community interest, it could be brought forward. The other thing I'd like to mention is that the way that we've worded the criteria for the additions is it's a two-pronged test. So it has to be less than 30%, but it also either has to not impact the heritage attributes in the case of an individual building, or in the case of a district, it has to meet the guidelines in the Heritage Conservation District plan. So it has to do both. It's not one or the other. So we put an and in there to sort of give an extra test.
Yeah, and Member Quinn, the only other thing that I read that I was reassured by is the fact that there will be an annual report. So we will get a chance at year's end to say, okay, this is what was happening. And if there's a level of discomfort about the volume or scope of some of those applications, there would be nothing stopping us from revisiting the numbers around the 30%. So I offer that as a possible way for us just to ensure that this is moving forward in an appropriate way. Councillor Wilkinson?
Just one of the definitions, you said it's 30% of the gross floor area, but in the definitions I don't see gross floor area. Is that the footprint area, or is, if you have a 3-story building, is it 3 times that?
Yes, it's the full gross floor area of the whole building, so we would use the zoning bylaw definition of gross floor area.
Which means that if they want to do a 1-story addition on it, could be huge.
As long as it doesn't, the reminder is that it would still have to meet the requirements of the Heritage Conservation District guidelines. So in Rockcliffe Park, for instance, the new plan that will be coming forward in the fall will talk more strongly about the retention of the landscape and the importance of there being a large amount of green space around the house. And so we wouldn't want to see an expanded footprint that would mean that the building now takes up 3/4 of the lot, even if it is only 1 story. So in that sense, we would say no, because it might be 30%, but it doesn't meet the guidelines.
I'm sure we'll have some interesting applications over the years. Thanks.
Mr. Vetcher?
I support the staff report on this. I think that in my experience over about 40 years of applications, I think that the intent of this is to keep them down to the minor interventions that are submitted. I have one question which might allay the concern that Caroline has here, and that is with this delegated staff authority to approve smaller projects like this, even up to 30%. If a community organization, could a community organization bring the matter to the Built Heritage Subcommittee? Is there a mechanism where they could do that? I know through the councillor, but is there another method just to reassure the Heritage community and residents that they could bring it to this committee if they wanted?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in the instance that there was something that the community felt very strongly about, I think there are 2 avenues. Staff could bring it forward, as was discussed a few minutes ago, but also the ward councillor, in the same way as site plan, can withdraw delegated authority.
Okay. Seeing no more questions on the motion? Carried? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're moving now to item 5. Which is the application for demolition and new construction at 285 Acacia Avenue. We do have speakers on the list. We weren't going to have a staff presentation, but if members have questions, staff are certainly available to answer them. But what I suggest is, why don't we hear from the public delegations first, and then if members have questions for staff, we can follow up appropriately. So our first speaker on our list is Leslie Mainland, who I think I appropriately refer to as the past president of Heritage Ottawa. So Leslie, feel free to come up to the microphone.
Mr. Chair, just an interjection. I do have a picture if we want to put anything up, but I haven't loaded it yet. It's up to the committee.
So sure. I mean, if you get a chance to load it onto the screen, that would be great. Good morning, Ms. Mainland. Welcome.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I'm not speaking specifically to this particular proposal, but I'd like to set the context for all of these Rockcliffe properties that you're looking at. Those of you who have been on the Built Heritage Subcommittee know this to be a fact, but for those of you who are new to it, Rockcliffe Park ballpark figure is about 50% of the projects that you look at. So it's a huge proportion of the interventions way out of scale with the heritage conservation districts elsewhere in the city. And it's a place where currently, the management plans have done done a great deal to alleviate some of the controversies, but some of the proposals have been extremely controversial and quite divisive in the past, on demolition by neglect issues and so forth. So it's kind of Rockcliffe Park is kind of a crux for the crossroads of many heritage issues, and so while I encourage you to take an interest in all of the heritage throughout the city, I would just like to take this opportunity to draw to your attention that on next week, on June 17th, Martha Edmonds, who is a longtime resident of Rockcliffe Park and the author of the definitive history of Rockcliffe Park, will be giving a lecture at 380 Springfield Road at 7:30, and this is a lecture in the Heritage Ottawa lecture series. This is an opportunity to discuss some of the issues. She is very knowledgeable about the history, but also about contemporary issues, and this is a lecture series that is supported by Andrex Holdings in the City of Ottawa, for which we're very grateful, as well as the Province of Ontario and Jenny, Jeff, and Shan Realtors. So just an opportunity to say this is it's a good learning opportunity about an important part of town. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that presentation. Any questions for Ms. Maitland on her presentation? No? Thank you very much for coming. Next on our speakers list is Osman Giolarato, who is scheduled. Do you want to speak, sir? No, you're speaking in favor, so you don't need to speak if the committee recommends approval. Is that correct? Okay. Okay, so any questions from the members on the application? I think you will have seen, oh, sorry, we have one other. So we have Mr. Malhotra. You're on our list too. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, I'm only here for this question.
Okay, so the applicant is here if members have questions. No questions? Comments or questions are fine. If you have comments, that's okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. I guess a concern that comes to mind for me is just, and again, as Ms. Maitland pointed out, and as I said earlier, Rockcliffe Park, properties in Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District are coming before us regularly. And I look at this, the property at on Acacia that's before us this morning, and looking back at some of the, yes, you know, as an example, an outstanding example, architectural example, the house is not. Its historical associative values have clearly been demonstrated in the report that has been shared with us. But I do also want to take this opportunity to just draw the committee's attention to the fact that within this conservation district, and especially this area, as identified that the houses are demonstrate a particular development during a particular time in the history of the village, that the value lies in the sum of the parts, perhaps more than it does in outstanding individual examples. And I think as a committee we need to keep this in mind, that as we take away, as the smaller, perhaps less grand architectural examples are constantly being demolished, we no longer have the ability to say that the value lies in the sum of the parts, because the parts are no longer there. And it is a concern, I think, that we should be aware of as members of this committee. And this is just an example of, once again, before us that brings it to mind for me personally. Not to say that the design of the house that is going to replace it, it doesn't have a lot of value. There is also integrity and value in the building that is there in terms of that, what it contributes. I mean, this is not a Part 4 designation, it is part of a Part 5 designation, and that means something. So, just a comment.
having problems with the mic this morning. Thank you, Member Quinn. I think that was an insightful contribution, and I guess I would say two things. The fact that the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District plan is coming forward this fall, I think is a useful way of ensuring that the HCD in this area is supported and buttressed, and I know the community is looking forward to having those additional protections. So I think the plan will give us an opportunity to think a little bit holistically about ways that we ensure the integrity of the HCD moving forward. So that's the first point. But I think you're right to raise that. I just wanted to say, both as the ward councillor and as the chair, that I'm supporting the application. I was reassured by the fact that the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association, which has a very active development review committee, did spend a lot of time on this and did not oppose the application. So there wasn't community opposition. And I was also informed by the point Member Quinn made, which is that the replacement building put forward does provide, in my mind, massing and scale, which is more appropriate than I would argue some of the replacement buildings in Rockcliffe Park have offered in the past, which I think were unfortunate examples of replacement buildings. It was before my time, so I can say that. So I just wanted to articulate my view, since I am the ward councillor for this application. Mr. Small.
Thank you. I just would like to respond to Member Quinn's comments, because I sit on the Development Review Subcommittee, and we did spend quite a bit of time on this application, and I think our decision to support it was based on the replacement that was proposed. It didn't, as our chair has alluded to, it didn't push to the max. It respected the streetscape, the settings, what is very important in the village is that rhythm as you go down the street, that there are open green spaces around the properties, and this is an example of where that is being maintained. We were also impressed with the proponents' commitment to respect the desire within the Heritage District that there be natural materials used, and that a lot of thought and effort be put into the dwelling that's going to be built there. So we did spend quite a bit of time on it. We were very much concerned about some of the points you raised, but in the end we were convinced that this was indeed the best proposal for the site in question.
Okay, seeing no other requests for comment from members on the motion, carried? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving to the next aspect of our agenda. Any notices of motion? No. Any inquiries? I see none. Okay, under other business, I just wanted to give the committee an update on one item which we dealt with at the last meeting, which was the Sandy Hill Heritage Study update. You'll recall we had quite a complicated but ultimately useful discussion on the issue of the boundaries of the Sandy Hill character. I always get this one mixed up. Cultural Heritage Character Study. There are too many words in that. Whereby we voted 7-0 to include 3 blocks of King Edward, which had not been in the staff report, but had been in the original study area. So in consultation with the chair, with Chair Harder, what we decided to do, because the University of Ottawa felt that it wanted an opportunity to discuss this with both chairs and with the staff, is that we agreed to defer the issue of those additional 3 blocks to a report which staff is going to bring forward back to us in October. And in the meantime, I will be meeting with staff and both with Action Sandy Hill and the University of Ottawa to see if we can come to some kind of agreement and see where the university, sort of how it feels about all this, and then the issue will come back to us. So the issue hasn't gone away. But there was some discomfort at Planning Committee with going ahead without the opportunity of having this opportunity to hear from and speak to the university. So I just wanted to report back on what transpired with that item. I believe there was another item under other business, was there not? Mr. Vice Chair, did you have something? No? Okay. Okay, well, then the only other thing I would say is I believe that we are going to be in touch with you to look at your availability for our summer meetings. We're planning to hold a meeting both in July and August. I think the dates have been made available to you, and we just hope that we have enough people for quorum for August. So you may get an email from Rosemary just confirming your presence in Ottawa for that August meeting date. No other orders of business, other issues to raise? Seeing none? Great. Can we be adjourned? Adjourned? Great. Thank you, everybody.